session. We are going to hear from Jamie Ferguson today. I'm very excited about this presentation, so I hope you all are too. We'll have a presentation, then we'll end off with some questions. Jamie, take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning and happy Friday to everyone. And I want to thank Doug for the plug. I picked this time slot intentionally because it's right before lunch. And so I intentionally will try to stay on task so Keegan doesn't hit the leave meeting exactly at a quarter till noon. But I have to say it's very hard to go after a comedy show that just happened. So I don't have the same level of comedic acts in this presentation. But one thing that Doug and Jackie mentioned that is definitely true for me is technology is scary. And so just bear with me as I go through this presentation. But welcome to my presentation, which is called All A's Using GIS to Get the Perfect Grade in Cultural Resources Outreach and Stewardship. And I want to give a plug to the GIS team because if we're getting A's in cultural resources, it's largely because of the help that you all are giving us. And so I'm really happy to be here today to talk about two programs that I help manage where I've received substantial assistance from GIS, particularly Tiffany, who I know is not here today, but I do want to give her a shout out for helping me. So the two programs that I'll be talking about is our interpretive signage program, which if you look at the image to the left, that is our newest sign at the Royce Hansen Conservation Park. And I actually worked on that with Jackie, who just presented, and Diana, who's going to be presenting after me. So this is a big PPSD day for us, and so I'm excited about that. I'm also going to talk about our cemetery program, and the image to the right is the Prather Cemetery, which, if you're not familiar with that site, is in Rock Creek Regional Park near Meadowside Nature Center. And the folks you're seeing there are the Montgomery County Conservation Corps, who provide me with a lot of assistance in taking care of those burial sites. So as I noted, my name is Jamie Ferguson. I'm a historian. I work within Cultural Resources Stewardship Section. We're a bunch of professionals who have been tasked with maintaining anything really historic on parkland. And what you're looking at right now is a page from our new strategic plan that we just worked on earlier this year. And one of the goals for our group, if you look in the green section where it says our work, the first bullet says inventory, document, and analyze archaeological sites, historic structures, cemeteries, and landscapes to inform future stewardship efforts. And this is where GIS is really helping us to do that. They're helping us to essentially know what we have and to help us figure out how do we take care and take responsibility of what we're managing on behalf of Montgomery Parks. And I should say, it's important that this happens because we do put a lot of effort into this work. So we want to make sure that folks know about these sites and that they're useful to the general public. So with our cemeteries, we do have a legal and ethical responsibility to take care of our burial sites. And I have to say I'm biased because this is part of my work program. I do think probably one of the most important resources that we're tasked with protecting on parkland is human remains. And so I'm going to get into a little later about the cemeteries we manage, but these are areas, it's probably hard to believe, but these are great sites for social connectivity. It's been that way in the past, and we're hoping that through awareness we can encourage people to visit our cemeteries and go out and have picnics, have conversation with their friends and learn about these burial sites in the communities that they're served. And as a historian, I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't just say, for all of us that work in parks, our industry, its origins are within cemeteries. You think back in the past, really public green space that was saved for communities were within these rural cemeteries, the first being in 1831, and that's the picture that you see here to the left at Mount Auburn in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But you think about memorial parks like those tied to battles like Gettysburg and veteran parks. Those are the forerunners before the NPS and before we evolved. So we do kind of owe a debt of gratitude to the cemetery movement. So for folks who aren't familiar with all the cemeteries in Montgomery County, we have quite a few, and I wanted to provide some GIS tools to help you learn where these cemeteries are at and where you can find more information about them. And so you're looking at two different maps that convey essentially the same information, and they're both administered by the planning department. The one on the right, you're probably more familiar with if you use MC Atlas. If you look on the side, you have all these options. If you go under historic preservation information, you can click on burial sites known and burial sites approximate, and it will populate with all the cemeteries that are known. The same thing essentially happens on the other map, which is the burial sites in Montgomery County. I wanted to mention this one because this might be more useful depending on how much information you want to get. Again, it shows known and approximate. I like this one a little bit better because the approximate is in those big purple blurbs. And that's really to indicate that we don't really know the exact location of those burials because there's no markers. So it's based on, archival evidence, oral history, and things of that sort. And this is administered by Brian Crane, who is the archaeologist in the Historic Preservation Office. And he is by law required every year to update this map. So if any new cemetery is located, it has to be updated here. And I want to raise that up as I'm talking to park staff. If you are doing projects like Doug and Jackie were just talking about, if you're doing a project where there's potential where you could come in contact with a cemetery, please reach out to Cultural Resources. And the way we really divvy up work with the cemeteries is anything above ground is more in my house. If it's below ground, then that falls with our archaeologists. But there's a lot of overlap. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to us and we will be happy to help you. But for the general public and staff, if you want to learn more about any of these cemeteries, let's just, for example, say we clicked on the circle for Montgomery Chapel Cemetery, which is one of the cemeteries that we manage here in Parks. It's going to lead you to information from different survey forms. So starting in 2004 and continuing in 2018, the county took steps to start to document all the known cemeteries in the county. And so all that information is now available at MC Atlas or the other map that I showed you. And so this is the more recent survey forms from 2018. And this is information you would expect to see. It tells you the name of the cemetery, the address, GPS coordinates, what type of cemetery it is, where it's at, how many burials, its condition, who to contact if you have concerns, who did the survey, and additional comments. It has a map to show you on the ground where it's at. It has an aerial. And if you keep going through the document, it also has photos. The problem with these documents is they are not ADA compliant. And so for some users, they can't access this information. So, and that's a problem. We want everyone to have equal access to information. And so kind of the macro map that you were looking at earlier with all the cemeteries in Montgomery County, we decided we wanted to have a map where it just shows the cemeteries on a micro level that we manage on land owned by M-NCPPC or managed for the county. And so right now we're up to 16 known cemeteries and counting. And I want to plug Jackie in her presentation for saying that we manage 11.5% of all the land, public land in Montgomery County. So there's always potential that the number 16 is going to increase over time when we manage that much land. And just so you know, with 16 cemeteries, there's no entity in the county that manages more cemeteries than M-NCPPC. That includes the state or federal government. So we have a lot to take care of, but we also have sites we want people to come out and use. And so this map is part of a new website that we worked on, and I had a lot of help from PACP. I know folks from that staff are here, and I want to extend thanks to them. I started working on this with Lisa, and now I'm working with Michelle to ensure that this remains ADA ADA compliant, and it's updated with any new information. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go to the website, but this is the address at the bottom. If you wanted to click to it, this is the landing page. So you would read a little bit about, the burial sites in Montgomery County that we manage. But in terms of GIS, what I want to focus on is over to the right, where it says our cemeteries, and it has a list of all the cemeteries we manage. And let's say, again, we want to look at Montgomery Chapel Cemetery. So you would click on that link, and then you would go to its home kind of landing page. And so it immediately tells you where the research is from. And this is important. This is an A that's really important to our section, but I know for our whole division is ensuring accuracy, that everything that we provide to the public is based on facts. And so right up front, the public knows where this information is coming from and who they can go talk to if they have questions. But for the sake of this presentation, what I want to point out is the maps below that. Again, we wanted to make a accessible map for the public, and so Tiffany helped me do that. So the Google Maps link is an ADA compliant map, but Tiffany took it to a whole nother level, and she made this Montgomery Parks dynamic map app, and that's what you're looking at on the right. So anyone can use this. So if someone went to this and they looked at it, they would say, okay, I know this is close to the Frederick County line. It's not that far from Clarksburg. It's got, it's a post-emancipation based on these dates for the earliest burial, and the latest burial puts it a little bit after, in the late 1960s. Cool. If that person wants to go back to learn more, then they would click on the Visit Montgomery Chapel Cemetery page. And when they do that, they're going to see all the information from those survey forms. If you remember a couple of slides earlier, you saw that form that had all that information. Well, we took all that and made sure it was ADA compliant. So anyone can get to this information and read it thoroughly. So again, evaluation, description, comments, burial site contact. The only thing we did not include were the photos, but everything else from those forms are there. And again, if you want to go see this page, you certainly can go see it at this web link. And I specifically pulled out Montgomery Chapel Cemetery because we're doing a lot of good work at this particular cemetery, and ideally what we're doing there, we want to replicate at all of our cemeteries. So last year, we were awarded a grant from the African American Heritage Preservation Program, and that's administered by Maryland Historical Trust. And we use those funds, or a part of the funds, to do a GPR survey of the cemetery. And that's a means for us to have a better idea, to delineate the extent of the cemetery and how many burials are there. So it's not uncommon for our cemetery to have more burials than markers. So it helps us have a better idea of what's going on underground. And that way, if we do want to make improvements to this park down the road, we know where we have sensitive areas we have to be watchful for. The other thing that we've done at Montgomery Chapel is we've invested funds in doing conservation work. And I know a lot of people who are on this call participated in a cemetery preservation workshop we did last year at this chapel. And a lot of people helped clean those markers. And I want to give you an update. They look great. Howard went out, though, looked at every marker and he did before and after photos. So you can see here with Julia Purdum's marker, you can see before it was laying flat on the ground, the marker was broken. He's now uprighted it and fixed the marker. And so these are things we definitely want the public to know. We want them to know that we are we're doing the best we can for stewardship to ensure that these last a long time, and that people can come out and feel like it's a safe space for them to come and, if they want to commemorate or memorialize people are there, or they just want to spend time having a picnic, they can certainly do that. And all this information helps us to interpret the site. And so another part of the funding we received from the state is to do fabrication of an interpretive sign for that site. And so you're looking at a proof of that sign. It's not completely finished yet, but this is the latest iteration of that. And so with the new information we got from the GPR results, we can incorporate that into the sign. But what we're also doing, and again, this gets to the accuracy and the facts, is we're doing doing a lot of archival research. And I have an intern, Aaron, who is at Wheaton headquarters. And Aaron is I think he's now the third intern through Project Search who has been going through these death records for me. And that's what you're looking at on the left. Because cemeteries, a lot of times those markers are gone, we don't know who's there. And so this is the best tool for us to figure out and put that piece that puzzle back together. And so you're looking at the death record for George W. Butler. And George Butler is an important person to understand the story of this particular cemetery, because him and his wife, and that's who you see her photo on the cemetery panel there, they donated the land that the church was able to use to establish a footprint or a placement for the new church, as well as the cemetery. And it may be hard to read this, but this kind of documentation gives us a lot to work with. It gives us genealogical information. And that's really where I see the next step with this research, is helping us develop the descendant community. Because right now, we only know of one person who is living who remembers the church. It closed in 1964. And so we want to figure out if we can develop a community of people who have relatives who either used the church or who were buried here. And so this kind of documentation allows us to do that. And these are the type of things ultimately we'd like to feed into the website and also into the GIS products. And lastly, I can't applaud Tiffany more for this if I tried. I'm going to sound like a nerd here, but I really appreciate how she holds us accountable. So once a month, the first day of the month, I get an email telling me I need to check to make sure that this program is working. And every month I do this, and we have found glitches. So I like that she forces us to periodically check this thing. And this is important for us, because if these products don't work, it's a reflection on us. And so we need to stay on top of things and make sure everything's working, everything is up to date. So I really appreciate GIS for thinking that way. So now I'm going to make a switch to our interpretive signage program. And this is another program where GIS is really helping us to get the word out. And that kind of tool is awareness, okay? A lot of our signs are really hard to find, and people don't know about them. And I'm going to get to the new product that we're going to use. It's not quite out yet, but prior to that, this was really the best kind of web page where I could direct people to who wanted to know about our interpretive signs. And if you're not familiar with it, it is a good database to look at. It's called the Historical Marker Database. And a lot of our signs are in here. And this is one of my favorites. It's on Norbeck Rosenwald School, which isn't far from Needwood, which is where Cultural Resources is located. And it's great. You can click on this button for people who, for example, my daughter has dyslexia. She can't read all this content. She can click on that button and she can hear the content. You can go, you see the location, it has the GPS coordinates, it has touch for map, touch for directions, but we don't control the content, right? And so more importantly, it's not tied to EAM. And that's another thing as I move through this presentation that you'll see, that kind of tie is really important, because these signs are just like historic buildings. You know, when you buy a house, if you don't touch it for 20 years, it's not going to look the same in 20 years. And so with our interpretive signs, we need to have a better gauge of how the signs are holding up over time. And so GIS is giving us the means to do good stewardship. So earlier this year, Elena and I were tasked to record interpretive signage, part of a larger kind of global data management program where we're looking at all the kiosks and signs within the park system. So, you know, there's informational signs, there's all kinds of different signs. So we were tasked with just interpretive signs. So another way to look at this is these are educational signs. And so with working in field maps, in March and April, it took about 2 months. We went out and collected all of them. And so we're up to 140 signs that are in the database. We took pictures of everything, and in a minute, you'll understand why that was an important part of this function. But I do want to plug, it's not just our section. I know Cultural Resources Museums will be doing that. The nature centers are doing that. And so it's a great database for the public to know, like, oh my gosh, all these sites are out here and I can take my kids out here. And for example, this one is at Buzzard Farm at Ag History. That's a great place to take your family out for a picnic on Saturday and do a little education on the side. So this was a really fun experience for me and Elena. We both really enjoyed it. So I'm going to walk through how, what the kind of information that we generated out of this. And so if I have time at the end, I'm going to go live to the actual editor, but just for the sake of time and going back to what Doug said, technology is scary. I was afraid I might not get this to work. So by default, I just had a plan B that you're looking at. And so this is the Kiosk and Signs data collection app. And so with this, you can we've uploaded every sign, and when we went out, there were certain things that we were, recording, the name of every sign, who the owner and manager is. And although you see a lot for cultural resources, again, some of these are tied to different divisions within the park system. Now, what Tiffany did for this is, of course, she has filters, and the one that she did for us in cultural resources that I particularly am so thankful for is the signs related to cultural resources. Because that allows us to go straight to the ones that we're managing, because there are hundreds of signs in this database, because again, it includes every type of sign in the park system. So in addition to those kind of things, I want to point out a couple of things. You can see here to the left, it has a aerial map, and it shows you exactly where that marker is at. And also all the information that you see on the right, you can scroll down below the map on the left. So it's really user friendly. Some of the other categories that we're responsible for recording was, is a historic area work permit necessary for this sign? And you see a lot of yeses, and that's important not only for installing signs, but as we move forward in time, if we want to remove signs, it's good to let the Historic Preservation Office know. Any new signs, we need to coordinate with them. So it's just, that's good for us to keep tabs on. It tells you the park name, if the sign is near a particular trail, and you can see here at Airlawn, the sign that we did there is near the Airlawn Local Park Pass. Commission date is really important. That's the date the sign was installed. And so when Cultural Resources started in 2008, that's when I really started working on signs. But you're going to see in here, if you look at the one above for Westmoreland Hills, you see 12/31/07. Any sign that predates the origins of our section, we put that date on it, because frankly, I don't know when they were installed. And that includes a lot of bronze markers. We really have focused more on the MPS style of interpretive signage, but at any rate, we wanted to make sure we put in accurate dates so we can gauge the lifespan of these products, because some of them are ancient, towards 15 years, and really ideally signs should only be out for about 10 years. So it's good for us to keep tabs on how our signs are holding up over time. And lastly, there's a category for notes. So if Elena and I saw something that, didn't fit in one of these columns, we could certainly add that. And just to take a break from the database for a moment, I just wanted to point out, though, a lot of why this tool is so important is a lot of our signs are not accessible, and meaning for people with mobility issues, it may be hard to get to them, but also just in general, it may be hard for the public to find them without this kind of tool. And this is a good example. This is the Seneca Stone Barn, which is in Woodstock Equestrian Park. But this is not in the area where, you have horse trailers and things to kind of point you in the right direction. This is really kind of off the beaten path. You have to go out on Washy Road. And if you find this area and you get there, there's no actual parking lot. So you have to park basically in an agricultural field. walk through that same field. You have to ford a stream before you get to this building. So a lot of our signs are not as accessible as we want to be, but when you do an interpretive sign, you generally want it to be near the topic you're talking about. And so that's why that's placed here. So GIS gives us that flexibility where if we know people can't get out there easily, they can at least access the same information through this database. And getting back to the collection app, some of the other categories is panel material. And this is something, it's good for us to think about. Maybe fiberglass, as we, analyze the results, it may not be the best material. Maybe we need to go with another product. We also have a category, which you can't see well, but it says, is this sign related to cultural resources, natural resources, and resource analysis? We're getting better at being interdisciplinary and working with our partners. So some of these you'll see yes, yes, no, or yes, no, no. We're trying to get to the point where it makes sense, it's yes in all those categories. And I know, my colleagues in natural resources and resource analysis are really beefing up their signage programs. And I know that this is going to change over time. You're going to see more of their stuff being entered into this program as well. And lastly, really the most important thing that's in here for this presentation is sign condition. And so that's what I'm going to move to next. So when Elena and I went out, we took a lot of photos, and we did that because we wanted to truly assess condition. But what we found over time was we really couldn't, because frankly, some of our signs were so dirty, we didn't feel like we could make a fair decision without cleaning it and then taking a better look at it. So this late summer into fall, we went back out, and this is kind of our cleaning crew. We've got a spray bottle, Palmolive green soap, sponges, paper towels. We went out to every NPS style. We didn't do the bronze markers, just the ones that look like this. We went out and cleaned all of them. And so we did before and after pictures. And while doing that, we recognized it was really hard to look at those photos. And I've heard this in a lot of presentations. I love that GIS is so receptive when we, as the user, we can come back to them and say, look, can we make some improvements here? We want to see the pictures better. What can you do to help us? And typical Tiffany, within a week, came back with a web app attachment viewer, which is what you're looking at. And so this allows us to look at all the photos and in really better resolution. Now, I can't guarantee that you can read all the content, but you certainly could be able to look at the conditions. And so this is one that is at Kensington Cabin, and I was out there in April earlier this year. And you can see there's paint on it, which I'm imagining a child must have done an art workshop at Kensington Cabin in the building there, and came out and took their hands and put it on there. So it's not the worst thing that we've seen on our buildings, but again, we wanted to clean these and make sure they are holding up. And so when Elena went back in October, she cleaned it, and this is what it looks like. So now we can make a better assessment of the condition. And I mean, I'm biased. I think it looks pretty good. And again, all the same content on the kiosk and sign app is also here underneath this underneath the map. And again, it shows you where the sign is at. And if someone's looking at this again, they can say, hey, there's multiple destinations in Kensington. Maybe we can make a day out of it this weekend with the kids. So it's all great. So, just to give you a good example of why cleaning was essential, this is a sign at Woodstock Equestrian Park. I talked about it earlier. This is at the Brewer Farmstead. If we just went by the top image, this would automatically went in the poor needs removal category. But we decided, let's go out and clean it. So you can see what it looks like after we went back out. So it's still not great. This sign is, I think it's about 12 years old now. So it's past its lifespan, but for right now, it's legible. And that's probably the most important thing for me in terms of managing our cemeteries and interpretive signs. If they're not legible, they're not useful to the public, and they're a reflection on our ability to maintain our commitment to stewardship. So, by doing this exercise, it's really brought to our attention that we need to figure out on a more routine basis how we're taking care of these signs. And some signs, even when you clean them, they are done. And these are two examples. This is one at Hoyles Mill Ford, and this is probably one of the oldest signs in the system. And it's failing. The fabric is falling apart. The one to the right is a Micah Mine ruin sign, and it was vandalized this year. And since working on signs in 2008, this is the only sign that has ever been vandalized that I'm aware of. And that occurred, ironically, I went out there in March. It had not occurred. When I came back in October, this is what had happened. So again, doing these periodic check-ins, we know what's happening, and if we need to, to get the graffiti off this one, we're able to go into EAM and make that request. So, in total, and looking at the 140 signs, we have 16 in excellent condition. Now, those are typically the ones that are brand new, within 2 to 3 years of after being installed. At the other extreme, we have 32 in the poor condition and 15 in needs removal category. And this is really an example of what I'm saying is if you came to this park and you walked up this sign, you would have no idea what this sign is talking about, period. And so, we don't want our signs to get to this point. We want to keep them in the happy middle. Ideally, we want to keep them in good, but once they reach fair, then we know, we need to start planning, what are we going to do next with this sign? And that really leads me to the last A that I wanted to talk about, and that's advancement. How do we move the signage program into the 21st century? And I really think Elena has done an amazing job in pushing us into thinking about making signs bilingual, and we've had a lot of aid from PACP in doing that as well. So, our signs are bilingual. They're more interdisciplinary. I noted that earlier. We're talking about topics that have typically been ignored, and this is a really good example. But by doing this process, it really forced us to think about other things that we need to talk about as a larger group. And so some of those might be, instead of me and Elena going out and cleaning these, maybe we should establish our own volunteer crew, similar to Weed Warriors. That's a great example where we can get people excited about these resources, train them on how to clean them, how to enter the information in GIS, and how to truly assess these signs. That's one thing, that we could talk about. Another thing is, I know PACP is in the middle of designing the signage manual. I think maybe part of that conversation needs to be maintenance. Like, how do we take care of these things over time? Another question is, when we decide signage location, there needs to be more people at the table. And, there's a lot of people already at the table. There's archaeology, there's facility management or region staff. There's historic preservation office sometimes as necessary. But, one of the things I think Elena and I learned through this is we need to have HIFI. We need people who know trees to tell us, maybe you don't want to put this sign under this tree because, the bugs are going to eat stuff and the residue of them eating is going to end up on your sign, or the tree sap is going to shorten the lifespan of your sign. These are good things for us to know. So I'm encouraging us to think about having more people talking about signage and where it makes sense to install these things. And so I want to end, though, on a positive note. I'm really proud of this program, and particularly I really love this sign, and it's timely to have GIS in November. We just celebrated Veterans Day, and so I do want to commend all the men and women who work for our agency who have served our country so bravely, and thank you so much to them. And I also want to recognize it's Native American Heritage Month, and so if you're looking for activities to do with your family, I encourage you to go see this sign. It's at Rock Creek Stream Valley Park Unit 3. free. And eventually when the database is ready, you'll be able to see that on the map where exactly to go. But we certainly want to encourage you to go out and visit any of our sites. As I noted in the promo, hopefully we will encourage you to go out and take advantage of some of these signs. We, unlike the museum side of things, we don't have staff at a lot of our sites, so we really rely on interpretive signage to do the talking for us. And thankfully, GIS is aiding us in doing that. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jamie. This was so cool to hear about. I know so little except Tiffany gushing about this project.
Tiffany is great to work for. I think we've had a lot of plugs today and throughout the week, but my daily is typewriters. Sometimes it's quill and ink. So for me to get thrown into the world of technology, it is really scary. But I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. But Keegan and Carter and Niles, all you guys do great work, and so I appreciate the hand holding.
I think we have some questions, Keegan. You have a question?
Yeah, I guess question, comments, a whole bunch of other stuff. Jamie, you always say that about yourself in technology, but you're fine. You're always embracing it, even though you say you're not good at it. I guess related question, and I know you spoke about this a little bit. So I guess two questions. In accepting GIS and taking on this project, I guess, has it made you feel a little more comfortable with using it? And also, do you have any future projects where you would like to apply GIS to?
I do feel more comfortable. And actually, I really enjoy it. I think my biggest hurdle initially was I couldn't get it to work on my phone. And so I know that, again, shows you how afraid I am of technology. But once Tiffany helped me understand how I don't even own an iPad, folks. That tells you how little I'm into technology. Once she kind of walked me through how to use the iPad, I really loved it. Elena and I had talked about this. It's a lot of us sit at our desk a lot, and so we don't get out in our parks a lot. So it's really rewarding when you have the opportunity to go out and see people using what you work so hard on. I know there's several people on here who work on interpretive signs. It takes a lot of work to build those signs, and so much of that information uh, doesn't make the sign. And so I think and to answer your question, Keegan, about where we can take it, is all that information that doesn't make the sign. I would love to eventually get it to GIS, which, for staff and for the general public. And I know Elena, she talked about that Monday with her project. So, ideally I'd like to see that happen more globally with all of our projects. But I do feel more comfortable, and I 100% see the value, 100%. And the other thing I like about the database is it's in real time. So if Tiffany or me or Elena, if we make a change, it's instant. And so, everything is timely. And so, for example, if someone were to knock over a gravestone marker, or the public let me know that a marker had gone down, I can immediately mark that in the system. I can let EAM know these kind of things. And so, it's very helpful from a stewardship and point of view, for sure.
Definitely. And I guess I don't know if you mentioned this, so forgive me if you did. Do you use Tormate, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't talk about. Thank you for plugging that. So one of the new things that is at Royce Hansen Conservation Park, and will be at Johnson's local park, which Elena is working on, our audio post, where, for example, at Royce Hansen, we interviewed Royce Hansen. And so if you come out, you'll hear him talk about his favorite things, his legacy as planning board chair, and his work with the Ag Reserve. And Elena, thank you for saying that. They're solar powered. And so we're really excited about that. And on the actual post, they're in English, Spanish, and they have Braille stickers on the side. So again, trying to up the ante on accessibility as much as we can.
Definitely, I love it.
We have another question in the chat. Do other DMV jurisdictions have a GIS layer of their historical or cultural resource signs? You know?
You know what? That is a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if my cohorts from Cultural Resources know that as well.
You know, I remember seeing one somewhere, and now it is escaping my brain which entity it was from. But if it comes back to me, I'll let you all know.
I guess I would say I'm really excited that GIS is receptive to that, because you know when oh, thank you, Scott, none as good as ours. It, it's not on the same plane as buildings and cemeteries and archaeological sites, but again, it's meant to convey information, and it's also to help us with maintaining our responsibility to stewardship. So I'm really glad to be able to loop interpretive signage. And plus, I can't tell you how many times over the years, you know, someone from senior management has said, do you have a map of all the signs? How many do you have? Or the public has asked. And so it's so much easier to streamline this, and they can, whenever anyone needs that info, they can get that themselves.
Well, are there any other questions? I have a quick question. What was
Sure.
the most surprising sign that you came across?
In terms of condition?
Sure. Or even content. Maybe you cleaned it and you're like, oh, this is what it says.
You know, I think well, for folks who know, I've been here for a while, so practically every interpretive sign since 2008, I've had my hand on it in some capacities. There are very few that I'm not familiar with. I think what shocked me the most was, I think it was maybe last year, we did a field trip with the Historic Preservation Office, and we went to sites in Boyd's. And so we went to the Boyd Moglen House, and we have 5 interpretive signs there, and they were in really good condition when we were on the field trip. And so fast forward to October, I couldn't even read the signs, and I just couldn't believe it. But we cleaned them and they look perfectly fine. So again, it's good for us to know, you know, again, environmental conditions, how much sunlight they're getting, what kind of trees are under. I mean, these are the things that we have to consider. Like, again, the useful functionality of signage, you have to be able to read it. If it's covered in dirt, it's not doing any good. So we need to, you know, include that kind of in our maintenance plan. We need, in the same way that we take care of our historic houses, we need to take care of our interpretive signs.
Absolutely. Okay, Carter, I'll get to you in 1 second, but I do see folks are hopping off. So I want to first thank everyone for coming. I want to thank Jamie for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to plug our very last session for Geo Week. At 1 o'clock, we have Diana Rose talking about open area analysis and its uses for park planning, so don't miss it. But yeah, thank you so much. And if you have a few minutes, we can keep Carter can ask a question if other folks have any last minute things. But thank you.
Not a technical question, Carter.
I don't think so. I was just
Okay.
curious about the like the signs, like the National Signs Database. Is that something that you regularly contribute to? And
The one
like
that I showed
who
you?
can contribute to that? Yeah.
So it's funny, you know, I found out about this a couple of years ago. Joey Lample, who's my old supervisor, went to an award show or award assembly for a project in parks. I did not attend. And she called me that night. She said, you know, I was sitting there and this guy won an award and they were doing a presentation. And she said, I realized all your interpretive signs were part of his slideshow. So whoever this person was is who built that database, or as far as I know, he at least uploaded all the information about our interpretive signs in Montgomery County. And so I think at that point that kind of planted a seed, like, you know, we need to do something equivalent to that. But anyone in the public can upload information to that database. So we don't have quality assurance. That's my only concern about it is, like I said, if if things are rapidly changing or something has happened to a sign, we want to be able to alert the public and monitor those things in real time.
Yeah, like that's something I've contemplated because like I've attended a lot of presentations on open data at like conferences and stuff, and I just wasn't aware of that example. And we're unaware to us, at least it seems internally a lot of times, people are tracking a lot of the same data that we have, except it's like an open street map or open trail map or like in the sign database or these other places. So I think that's a good example where we can maybe benefit from that or give back to those same sources where the opportunities lie.
So,
Okay. Well, thank you all for your questions.
yeah, thank you,
We are
everybody.
yeah. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But otherwise, thank you all for coming. Again, thank you, Jamie. And hopefully see you all at 1 for our last session.
Yeah, enjoy your lunch.
Yes, enjoy your lunch. Have a good one, everyone.
Don't forget to stop recording.